Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a close look at a moment that's really lodged itself in history. The sinking of the RMS Titanic.
Indeed. And we've got a lot to work with: archival footage, some fascinating expert interviews, maritime historians, archaeologists, even psychologists.
Right, plus dramatic recreations and, crucially, those personal accounts that still feel so immediate. Our goal here isn't just to, rehash the story. We want to dig deeper into the complexities, maybe challenge some myths,
Absolutely.
and really explore what this immense tragedy means, its lasting impact, especially for you, our listener, seeking a fuller picture.
And a great place to start is that whole unsinkable label. It's probably the first thing most people think of.
Right, the unsinkable Titanic.
Yeah. And our sources, well, they show that while Titanic was incredibly advanced for its time, I mean, double-bottomed hull, those famous watertight compartments.
State of the art, basically.
Pretty much. But unsinkable. That was more marketing and public excitement than, let's say, a technical guarantee. It wasn't designed to survive the kind of damage it actually sustained.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. These safety features, the compartments, they were innovative, but they had limits.
Exactly. Take the watertight compartments. Great idea, but the walls between them didn't go all the way up to the main deck, or ceiling, if you will.
Oh, okay.
So when the iceberg breached multiple compartments along the side, well, as one filled, the water just spilled over the top into the next, and then the next, like an ice cube tray tipping over.
Uh-huh. So it wasn't designed for that scale of breach.
No, not at all. And it's interesting why that unsinkable myth became so powerful. It really tapped into the feeling of the era, that Edwardian belief in technology's triumph over nature.
A kind of technological hubris, maybe?
Sort of, yeah. And that mindset possibly affected how everyone, from the builders to the passengers, viewed the actual risks involved.
Now, the sources also draw a really stark contrast based on social class on board. And this wasn't just about luxury, was it? It had life or death consequences.
Oh, absolutely. The difference between first class and steerage wasn't just comfort. It dramatically impacted survival rates. It's quite stark when you look at the figures.
And the women and children first protocol played into this.
It did, but not equally. While it sounds noble, in practice, it heavily favored first-class women and their children. Men overall had lower chances, and steerage passengers, men, women, and children, faced enormous hurdles.
Why was that? Just access to the lifeboats?
Partly access, yeah. Their cabins were often lower down, further from the boat deck. And then there were communication issues, barriers, sometimes literally locked gates initially. It's a really grim reflection of the era's social structure in a crisis.
Something else that always comes up is the speed and those iceberg warnings. We know other ships sent warnings, right?
Yes, multiple warnings were received via radio about ice in the vicinity. That's well documented.
Yet Titanic kept up a pretty high speed. What was going on there? Was it pressure to arrive early? Overconfidence?
It seems like a combination of factors. Firstly, the radio messages. Well, wireless was still relatively new. Warnings didn't always go straight to the bridge. Sometimes the operators were busy sending passenger telegrams.
So a communication breakdown, potentially.
Potentially, yes. And add to that, as we touched on, this likely sense of overconfidence, a belief that this massive modern ship could, handle it, or maybe just push through.
Which reduced their reaction time when the iceberg was finally spotted.
Critically so. At that speed, in the dark, the time between sighting the ice and impact was terrifyingly short. Much less margin for error to maneuver such a huge vessel.
Now, with an event like this, you get so many eyewitness accounts. Survivors telling their stories. But memories fade. Trauma affects recall. How do historians handle conflicting accounts?
That's a core challenge, definitely. The key is careful cross-referencing. You look for points where different accounts align, especially in factual details.
Like timings or locations.
Exactly. But you also have to consider the source. A first-class passenger's experience and viewpoint would be vastly different from someone in steerage. Trauma itself can distort memories.
So you weigh it all up.
You weigh it all up. You combine those personal stories, acknowledging their potential biases and limitations, with the physical evidence, like what we've learned from the wreck site itself, to build the most holistic narrative possible.
Talking about piecing it together, what about the initial investigations? Did they get to the bottom of it?
Well, the British inquiry, for example, focused quite heavily on the symptom, the lack of lifeboats, which was a massive issue, obviously.
But maybe not the only issue.
Right. Our sources suggest it didn't dig as deeply into, say, the operational practices of the White Star Line or the fundamental lack of international safety standards at the time. systemic problems.
And the American inquiry.
A bit more critical in some ways, but also hampered by, distance, evidence, perhaps a lack of full cooperation. Neither inquiry really captured the full complex picture we see now.
So it keeps coming back to this combination. You mentioned speed and lookout earlier as potentially fatal. Can you elaborate on that intersection?
Sure. Think about it. You're traveling fast, nearly 22 knots, through an area known to have ice. Visibility is good, but it's a moonless night.
Okay.
The effectiveness of the lookouts becomes absolutely paramount. Any delay in spotting an obstacle, any issue with relaying the warning instantly to the bridge, combined with the high speed reducing the time to react.
It closes the window for avoidance.
Precisely. It drastically shrinks that window. So even a small lapse in lookout vigilance or a slight delay coupled with that speed makes a collision far more likely. It's that alignment of factors again.
It's almost unbelievable, the chain of events.
Yeah.
But out of this immense tragedy, there was significant change, wasn't there? A push for safety.
Yes, that's one of the most important, if tragic, legacies. The sheer scale of the Titanic disaster was a brutal, unavoidable wake-up call to the entire maritime world.
How so? What did it expose?
It laid bare huge gaps. Lack of international standards for ship construction, not enough lifeboats, inadequate crew training for emergencies, inconsistent radio procedures. The list goes on. It forced nations to cooperate.
And that led directly to SOLAS.
Directly. The International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, or SOLAS, convened in 1914 largely as a response to the Titanic. It was a landmark moment.
What kind of changes did SOLAS bring in?
Key things we take for granted now. Mandated lifeboat capacity based on the number of people on board, not just the ship's tonnage. A 24-hour radio watch became compulsory.
So someone was always listening for distress calls.
Exactly. And crucially, the establishment of the International Ice Patrol, operated by the U.S. Coast Guard, to monitor iceberg dangers in the North Atlantic shipping lanes. These changes have saved countless lives since.
Then, much later, in 1985, the wreck itself is found. That must have reignited everything.
Oh, completely. Robert Ballard's discovery brought the Titanic roaring back into the public imagination. But more than that, it opened up a whole new chapter of understanding.
How so? What does finding the wreck tell us?
It allowed for, actual forensic analysis of the ship on the seabed, studying the damage, how the ship broke apart, the debris field. It answered some questions and, frankly, raised new ones. Ongoing explorations still yield insights.
And alongside the exploration, there's the recovery of artifacts, objects from the ship.
Yes, and these are incredibly powerful. Personal items, bits of the ship's fittings, they provide such a tangible link back to the people on board.
Moves it beyond just statistics in history books.
Absolutely. They help humanize the disaster. You see a pair of shoes, a letter, a piece of china, and you remember these were real individuals with lives and families. It's profoundly moving.
It also forces us to think about the survivors. The trauma they carried.
Unimaginable trauma.
Yeah.
Witnessing that level of loss, the chaos, the cold, it left deep psychological scars. Our sources touch on this, the long-term impact not just on the survivors themselves, but potentially rippling through their families for generations.
So the legacy isn't just about safety regulations.
Not at all. It's this incredibly complex tapestry of loss, yes, but also survival, resilience, the enduring human spirit facing the unthinkable.
So when we step back and look at the whole story, Titanic seems to represent, well, quite a lot.
It really does. It's become this enduring symbol. On one hand, a symbol of incredible human ambition, ingenuity, that drive to build bigger, better, faster.
The peak of Edwardian confidence.
Right. But it's equally a symbol of catastrophic failure, a reminder of our vulnerabilities, how things can go wrong through a mix of overconfidence, maybe negligence, systemic flaws, and sometimes just sheer bad luck. Its legacy is in the lessons learned, the safety improvements, but also in this ongoing fascination.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've gone from debunking the unsinkable myth to seeing the stark social divides mirrored in survival rates. We've looked at the warnings, the speed, the communication issues.
And the investigations that followed, the shortcomings there, but also the vital safety regulations like SOLAS that emerged from the ashes.
And finally, the rediscovery of the wreck and the human stories embodied in the artifacts and survivor accounts.
Which brings us to a final thought, really, for you, the listener. When you consider everything, the ongoing research, the technology then versus now, those deeply personal stories, what single aspect of the Titanic tragedy resonates most strongly with you?
And maybe, what does that particular aspect tell us about ourselves today? about our own relationship with technology, with risk, and perhaps with that enduring human element in it all. Something to ponder.